Hook, the Dawn Bulletin. It was a crisp, fresh autumn morning. Squirrel was sitting back, peacefully enjoying his morning coffee, when a piercing scream suddenly erupted from his vintage radio. Breaking news. Breaking news. The debt of the Chestnut Forest has officially crossed. The news anchor abruptly paused, gasping for air, before crying out, 37 trillion chestnuts. Splat! The coffee cup slipped from Squirrel's hand, falling into a free fall and shattering into pieces on the ground. 37 trillion? Squirrel stared blankly at his own wallet. Exactly 32 chestnuts left. He looked back at the radio, doing the math in his head. If I counted one chestnut every second, without sleeping, eating, or resting, it would take over 1,000,000 years just to count that entire debt. Squirrel bolted up and screamed, "We're bankrupt." But as he rushed out into the street, he witnessed a bizarre scene. No one was panicking. Rabbit was happily opening her shop. Bear was casually driving to work. Fox was fully absorbed in posting travel photos on Squirrel Book. Even the Oak Tree Council was throwing a lavish party. Squirrel stood frozen. He asked a trembling question that made everyone turn and stare at him as if he were an alien. If we owe that much, why is nobody afraid? Chapter 1. The Wealthiest Forest in the World. Welcome to the Chestnut Forest, the wealthiest forest on the planet. It boasts the most bustling cities, the most powerful corporations, the biggest banks, and it also carries the most colossal debt burden in history. To run this forest, the Oak Tree Council collects chestnuts from all residents. We call this taxes. They use these chestnuts to build bridges, pave roads, pay salaries to soldiers, teachers, and doctors, and keep the social machinery running smoothly. It sounds perfectly reasonable, but then, Squirrel discovered a frustrating truth. The Oak Tree Council had a chronic habit of always spending more chestnuts than they collected. Year after year, not just for a year or two, but this budget deficit had persisted for Squirrel's entire life. Chapter 2. The Unlimited Credit Card. One day, Squirrel decided to visit Old Owl, reputed to be the wisest scholar in the forest. Old Owl, what happens if the council completely runs out of chestnuts? Old Owl smiled calmly. Why, they borrow, of course. Borrow from whom? From everyone. Old Owl nodded. From the Squirrel Bank, the Chestnut Capital Fund, pension funds, wealthy forests across the ocean, and even from the retirement savings of the citizens themselves. In return, the council issues them a piece of paper that clearly states, "Lend us your chestnuts today, and we will pay you back in the future, plus interest." Squirrel chuckled. Oh, so it's just like a giant credit card. Old Owl looked deep into Squirrel's eyes and lowered his voice. Exactly. Except, this card has no credit limit. Chapter 3. The Midnight Secret. That night, Squirrel tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He grabbed a pen and paper, meticulously crunching the numbers. And then, a figure stared back at him that sent a shiver down his spine. The council never actually paid off their old debts. They simply issued new, larger bonds to pay off the old ones. He calculated it once. Same result. He calculated it again. Still the same. Early the next morning, Squirrel ran at breakneck speed to Old Owl's house. Are we using new debt just to pay off old debt? Old Owl took a sip of hot tea, completely unfazed. Yes. How long has this been going on? Old Owl looked out the window, his gaze drifting into the distance. Much longer than you think. Squirrel felt a cold chill run down his spine. But if this keeps up, that debt will never disappear. Old Owl nodded slightly. Right again, my boy. Chapter 4. The Colossal Snowball. It was only then that Squirrel began to understand the true nature of the problem. The terrifying part wasn't the principal, it was the interest. For example, if you borrow 100 chestnuts, next year you have to pay back 105. If you don't have those 105 chestnuts, you are forced to take out a new loan to cover it. Then, the following year, you have to pay interest on that new loan as well. And so, debt breeds more debt. It works exactly like a snowball. It starts as a tiny clump of snow, but the further it rolls down the hill, the more it accumulates, growing bigger and bigger. Eventually, it reaches a tipping point where no one, no power on earth, can stop it. Squirrel looked up at the distant hill. In his mind's eye, he saw a giant ball of chestnuts, as massive as the entire city, rolling down slowly and relentlessly. Chapter 5. The Suits. But why hasn't the system collapsed yet? Squirrel wondered. Old Owl smiled, because we have the Central Squirrel Bank. Just then, experts from the central bank walked in. Clad in sharp suits and donning intellectual spectacles, they exuded absolute calm. If creditors no longer want to lend to the council, we will step in and buy up the debt ourselves. Squirrel was astonished, but where on earth do you dig up that many chestnuts? The experts exchanged glances, flashing a mysterious smile. We create them. Squirrel froze. Create them? Out of where? They kept smiling and replied politely, we're sorry, kid, but that question isn't in our script. Chapter 6. The question everyone avoids. Many years passed. The forest continued to run smoothly. Shops were packed with customers, skyscrapers kept shooting up like mushrooms, and the stock market constantly hit all-time highs. Everyone believed everything was fine. Until one day, Squirrel stood up and asked a question. A question that everyone had been deliberately avoiding. What if, one day, the lenders lose market confidence in our forest? The room instantly fell dead silent. What if they demand skyrocketing interest rates? Still, a haunting silence. And what if they demand we repay all the chestnuts immediately? Not a single sound answered him. Finally, Old Owl gave a soft sigh, and that is exactly why we must keep praying, that the day never comes. Conclusion and lessons. That night, Squirrel stood on the hilltop, quietly gazing down at the city panorama. The neon lights were bright, laughter still echoed through the air, and restaurants were packed to the brim. Everything looked completely normal, but for the first time in his life, Squirrel learned a vital lesson. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing in an economy is not the moment everything collapses. It's when everything looks perfectly fine, right before it all shatters into pieces. Debt itself is not inherently dangerous. But when an entire forest falls into the illusion that they can borrow forever, the scariest part is no longer the numbers on the bill. It's the blind faith that the debt will never become a problem.
What do you think? See you in the next episode!